If you're an adult amateur horse lover who wonders what it takes to make magic with horses, you're in the right place. I'm Paige Lockton, and this is the magic of Horsecraft. Join me for conversations with wizards in the world of horsecraft about the ingredients needed to build connection with horses and courage in life. Turns out these things are connected. How do I know? Like most things, I learned the hard way. I lost the magic I once had with horses. In regaining it, I discovered that the elements of connection are learnable. Whether you ride your horses forwards, backwards, or sideways, stick around for stories that show us how we are the same and that anything is possible. Take a chance. Welcome. Join me to talk to Victor Bahna, author of Heliacal Star, an exciting novel about racehorses for all you horse lovers out there and a great idea for Christmas gift. And tonight we talk about racehorses, some of the things we love about the industry, and some maybe we don't love so much. And we look at how we can change it. So find out what Victor Bahna has done with his assets. His assets are storytelling assets. And storytelling can change the world. Tonight we're going to tell some stories about racehorses and see what we can do about changing the world of racehorses. Take a chance. So, Victor, pleasure to meet you. Rochelle and Claudia, I know from helping through a series of clinics that I've been doing.
Excellent.
They have been my beta testers for my programs.
Okay.
As I make a huge shift in my own horsecraft. As a background, coming as an event rider, I'm now coaching them a lot about how our nervous systems work, how to hack into your own and regulate it even under stress, and how that impacts the horses. And I'm coming into the industry because I didn't love it and I had left it. And the rule is, I think, either love it or change it, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I'm coming back to change it. And
Excellent.
that's why you're here.
Excellent. That's great. Great to meet you too. Thank you
Hmm.
for having me and for your time. I appreciate it.
Super. So, for those of you who don't know, Victor is an author and a horse lover, and he has brought these things together in the racing world with what sounds to me to be not just a great novel and story, but something that is very purpose driven. So it sounds to me like I don't know what came first, horses or writing.
Horses. Absolutely horses.
They came
Yes.
first. So before you were
Yeah.
an author, you were a horse person.
Yes, definitely.
And how did horses fit into your life?
Horses start, well, my career with horses was more of a spectator to start with. Growing up on Long Island, not too far from the racetrack. That was my really first introduction to horses, and I'd say I was pretty captivated just the first time I went there. I was also quite young, and there was a gambling element to that, which was also pretty exciting. But even just watching them race and just seeing the power, the beauty, the grace of the horses just kind of captured me from the very start. I took a course actually in college at my senior year in horsemanship, and that taught me a little bit of riding, and we did just some, very basic stuff. I think we jumped over a couple bars maybe, but we also learned, quite a bit about horsemanship and grooming and taking care of them. And then I got busy in working and having a career, and I probably didn't spend a whole lot of time with horses for quite a while. I ended up moving from New York to Washington State and was in a tech job for, still am actually, but they opened up a racetrack here in the late 90s, and I kind of got interested in that, and I ventured down there. But this time it felt different in the sense of not so much from a gambling or spectator perspective, but really much more interested in getting much more involved in the sport itself. And so I went to a seminar, talked to a couple of the folks that were involved, and that was about 20 plus years ago. And from then, it's just kind of snowballed into what it's become. Um, Purchased my first racehorse back in the early 2000s.
Mhm.
Ended up going through a couple of interesting, ups and downs. The excitement and the thrill and just becoming an insider into that whole world was all new and new experiences for me. But also then finding out, horse gets injured and they're not necessarily going to race again, and you're thinking to yourself, "Uh-oh, what happens now? What do I do?" And
Yeah.
all of a sudden the reality starts to hit you, and it's a light bulb moment because you're all of a sudden faced with, okay, I've got to find, the right answer for this horse and make sure that they're going to be well taken care of. And that's when you find out about all these bad things that could happen if you don't do that. So
Yeah.
that was a big inspiration for me. So that mare we ended up actually breeding, so she became a brood mare for me. And I've had a few others that I've since retired. One of them I actually then retired locally here about 10 years ago, and I work with him on a pretty regular basis. I've learned to ride him and he's taught me he's taught me more than I could have ever imagined actually before I was involved with him. Coming from a pretty high stress tech world, just and he's it's about a 40-minute drive from where I am
Hmm.
here. So by the time I get out to the farm, all of a sudden, I go from the corporate tech world to a farm of outdoors and nature and horse smells, and it's almost like, I could feel myself decompressing a little bit with regard to the day-to-day stresses. Although sometimes he will actually add to the stress depending on what's going on.
Well, he's a thoroughbred.
He is a thoroughbred, yeah, and he was a good thoroughbred at that. But I should say he was a good racehorse. But yeah, we work pretty regularly, and I've learned so much more just in terms of horsemanship and grooming and relationship, and we've connected quite a bit. And then it was about 7 or 8 years ago. I thought to myself, I had actually never had thought I was going to write a book.
No.
And yeah, it was just one of those, again, it's like another light bulb moment. I was just sitting on a beach one day and I'm thinking, you know what? I've got a lot of information in my head, and I'm not happy about the way things are going in some cases, particularly with horses that can end up in a trailer. U.S. had banned horse slaughter back in the 2000, and I don't know the exact date, but a dozen or so years ago. But you could still transport horses to Mexico or into Quebec, and they would slaughter the horses there, and that's even less pleasant if there is a way to compare the two, because they've got to be put on a trailer and
Yeah.
then they could be shipped, and they know what's going on, and they're scared, and it's just not a good scenario for them.
I think that's
Um,
important to just stop and touch on. You just said they know what's going on and you carried on your conversation. And I
mhm,
don't know if people actually realize these
mm,
horses on those trailers headed there and went, they
mhm,
know.
mhm.
Yeah, it isn't a nice thing to be around and be a
It's
part
not.
of.
It's
Yeah.
not. And even before they even get on the trailer, how well are they being cared for? They're being basically sold for the pound, and
Yeah.
and that's what I wanted that was part of the story I wanted to communicate. I didn't want to be preachy in the book itself, but I wanted to just describe a scenario where you could be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for a yearling prospect at an auction, and at some point in that horse's life, they go from being, the darling and the Kentucky Derby, potential, to becoming you know, being sold for the pound on the way to a slaughterhouse. And so that was kind of the nexus of the story itself. And then I sort of built all of the characters and the plot lines and the story around that. But that was my moment in terms of, that sort of, hey, I could write a book and I could I could bring a little bit more light perhaps to this issue.
Yeah. So we want to get this book read, and I want to take a moment to go bookward. So,
Okay.
can you tell us about the main characters and the crux of the story without giving it all away, but give us a
Sure.
background. Tell us the story that you wrote.
Okay. So the book's namesake is Heliacal Star, and he is a racehorse. And our main character, his name is Matt. He takes a special liking to this horse after he places a hunch bet on him after making this interesting connection at the racetrack. Matt also is a former bookie who has since left his life in organized crime, but he left on not so good terms. And so he's he's on the backstretch one day. He sneaks off and takes his own self tour, I guess, on the backstretch one day at Belmont because he finds out that this horse, Heliacal Star, is stabled at one of the barns on the backstretch. And so when he goes and he wants to take a up close look at the horse, just on a kind of a whim. And as he approaches the shed row, he's about to turn the corner and he overhears a conversation. That conversation is describing this nefarious plot, which involves this particular horse. And not only does he hear this conversation, but he recognizes one of the voices, and the voice is one of his cohorts from the past, whom he did not have a very good ending with when he left that life of organized crime. So now he's kind of faced with this dilemma, and it's a bit of a moral dilemma, and he's got to decide, do I say something and potentially put myself at risk because I'm going to have to go face these guys that I don't ever want to see again?
Hmm.
Or do I just stay silent and just let bygones be bygones? And so that's where the story really starts to pick up, and lots of things happen from there.
Hmm.
He does meet a trainer along the way. Her name is Christine, and Matt and Christine teaches Matt actually quite a bit about what happens actually on the backstretch. And so you learn a lot about the comings and goings and just sort of the day in the life of what's going on the backstretch through Christine. And you can see Matt's sort of evolution, throughout the book, where he goes from being a handicapper and gambler to becoming someone that starts to connect, with the horses themselves, and he starts to find that unique relationship, and he starts to become much more sensitive to sort of the life cycle of the racehorse itself, and so that story kind of carries through the book.
Nice. So we're seeing a human evolution too, are we?
We are, yeah, we're
Yeah.
seeing a bit of an eye opener, if you will. He's always been kind of on the spectator gambler side, handicapping side, statistical side of things, and this horse kind of introduces him into a new world of being, of the horse itself, and it it I it humanizes it to a large extent to our main character. So you definitely see his growth throughout the story as well. And there is a very epic ending, which I won't get into, but as you get there,
Save something.
it definitely accelerates into a pretty exciting and unpredictable ending to the story.
Fun. So it makes it a fun read on top of the reasons we want to sort of purpose driven get it read because it's going to bring some issues to light and hopefully make people think differently about horses in the racetrack
Yeah,
and what happens to them. So um, what sort of things do you bring to light through the novel that you want people to think about in the racehorse world in real life?
sure. Yeah. I'd say a couple things. The first thing I would say is that the overwhelming number of people who are involved at the racetrack are deeply caring about the horses. I think that's not really well understood because of all of the headlines that you see sometimes with regard to, one or two bad actors, and they tend to, create the scenario for all racetracks, and it gets overgeneralized. But in my 20 plus years working, with trainers and really closely with them, being on the backstretch quite a bit myself and being up close with all these horses. I mean, everybody from the vets to the trainers to the assistant trainers to the grooms, the farriers, everybody is and the farms where they're turned out, everybody deeply cares about the welfare of the horse. And so that's one thing I do want to, express, and I do through the book itself. Doesn't mean we're immune to the bad actors, and every good book's got to have a bad guy, and so that
Yeah,
that
I
that
think
that does and can exist, and we should be aware of that too.
this is really something important. Again, I find things that I want to highlight. And
Yeah.
at a time with all horse sport under fire, whether it's
Yeah.
dressage horse sport or horse racing, um, there is so much of the like people want to talk about the atrocities, and yes, we do need to face them and make changes, but it's so important to remember that there is great beauty and joy in this
Mhm.
industry, and to focus instead of on the negative. I'm glad the first thing you did was to focus on more of what we want to create.
Mhm.
What do we want to create more of? These horses that want to run because they're treated like the jocks they are, the gods and goddesses of the horse world,
Yeah.
to go do these things that they find challenging and stimulating. And those thoroughbreds want to compete against each other. And I think it's people sometimes would maybe accuse me of being Pollyanna,
Mm.
but it's really important to keep ourselves locked in what we want to see and to acknowledge that thoroughbreds want to compete against each other,
Oh yeah.
want to outrun each other,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, they love it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, absolutely.
I stole a little bit of your flow, but that was one of the as you said that, I was like, thanks for starting there.
If this is resonating with you, and you've ever felt a little lost as you navigate conflicting data from horse pros across the disciplines, all claiming to have their own methods or recipes for making magic with horses, and you want the clarity and confidence to make sense of it all, I have a roadmap for you. Check out our foundation course. Consider it Horsecraft 101, From Amateur to Magician Making Magic with Horses, a unique group coaching program with live online support that helps adult amateurs from non-horsey families who are seeking understanding and connection become the best stewards for their horses in 9 weeks without conflicting data, lack of knowledge, or not knowing where to go to for help. So they understand how and why horses think and react the way they do to create a relaxed and confident relationship. If you're still on the fence, we have a freebie for you. If you're ready, so are we. You can get started at themagicofhorsecraft.com. Until then, take a chance and remember, anything is possible.
No, absolutely. It's I think it's a huge point, and again, I think it's often overlooked. I mean, most people that are at the racetrack have been work with horses their entire lives, and they don't do it because they're going to get rich. They do it because they have a genuine love and care for the horses and for the sport, and that's a lifestyle for them.
Mhm,
And if something happens to those horses, those people are devastated. They're not what you might read about, in some of the, media, with how they describe some of this.
mhm.
But then, you are in a sport where there's a lot of money. You're in
Yes.
a sport where there's a lot of gambling. And, there's going to be the temptation to bend the rules, perhaps, or, cheat a little bit. And so I do touch on that, as well, because that also makes for a good story. And so
And it's real.
and it's, yeah, there are definitely opportunities, let's just say.
Mhm,
So I educate the reader a little bit about some of those things. Some of them are relics of the past that you're not going to see today, and some of them still might be, viable in today's world. There's a lot more regulation. There's a lot more testing that's going on today. So what you got away with maybe, 20, 30 years ago, you're not going to get away with today.
mhm.
but they're not testing for everything,
Right.
and they're only going to catch you for what they're testing for. And so if you're clever and deceitful and nefarious and you're that kind of person, you might be able to get away with. I think eventually it will catch up with you, but it's that temptation could still be there.
Everybody's looking for an edge. What's the next edge? And
Yeah, yeah, and again with big money, and one of the things I do bring into the book is it's not necessarily even because the person is bad. It's because they found themselves in just a bad spot, and this was their way out, was
Mhm.
to or they were they were compromised in a way, and they had no choice, so they felt like they had no choice. And so you'll see that actually in this book itself is he is kind of a bad person. So I wouldn't say that he's a good guy, but he got there because of some things that happened to him before he started to cheat and compromise his own ethics, let's just say.
Yeah.
Um, so
And you
that's another area. Another point though is just this whole thing in terms of what happens to these horses when their careers are over.
Mhm.
And although there has been a lot more progress here as well over the last 20, 30 years, there still are horses that are going to fall through the cracks. And if they end up in the wrong hands, or you just happen to not know the person that you're working with, or handing your horse off to, you just don't know. And they could end up in the wrong place in the wrong hands. The next thing you know, they're at an agricultural auction, or they're in a kill pen somewhere, and they're one step away from getting on that trailer and heading to their final destination. And so I also wanted to bring light to that as part of the story as well. And so all of those things really do come together throughout the pages of the book.
Mhm. And have you, in your experience, seen changes in the horse industry in terms of aftercare after their
Yeah,
lives in sport are over?
I think so. Yeah, I've seen quite a bit of change. When I first started owning, like I said, when I had my first horse got injured, it was okay. What do you want to do with this horse? And it's not going to race again. And I'm thinking, well, what are my options? And I hear kind of the series of options that I have, and I'm thinking, wow, okay, I didn't know a lot of this stuff actually. And some of them were really good options, and some of them were like just the easy out, just but fortunately I hooked up with some really good people, and they guided me in the right direction, and we were able to do the right things for those horses. But nowadays there's a lot more promotion. Racetracks have foundations that didn't exist 20 years ago. They'll take donations from every start from owners. They'll actually just automatically deduct that from your purse account, and they'll put it towards these foundations. They'll actively promote, and it's a good thing because it's just bringing much more awareness too. And the racetracks themselves are holding themselves much more accountable. Like you see programs in New York or California, or other venues in which they, it used to be the tattoo, and now it's the digital chip. But now you can, if they do see any racehorse that ends up in a kill pen, there are big fines actually. And there's a
Oh,
lot of accountability now back to the trainers or to the owners of those horses. Even if they're the last owner of record or trainer of record. So it's creating a better breadcrumb trail, even in terms of if you're going to sell a horse, you want to make sure you're selling it to someone that is going to also not sell it down the line to one of those you know kill buyers or ag
mhm.
auctions. So there's just a lot more awareness, and then we're seeing a lot more regulation as well. For one, there's this thing called the Safe Act in the US, which is to actually prevent the shipment of the horses now. So they prevented the slaughtering in country, but that would actually prevent your ability to actually transport a live horse out of the country for the purpose of slaughter. And so that would be really good if we can get that passed in the US. That's currently, I think, in Congress. And then there's a lot of controversy right now on the whole Horsemen's Integrity Act. TISA that recently passed in the US as well. And, some folks will say it's a bit of an overstep, by the government getting involved with too much regulation. Others will say it's long overdue. And my opinion of it is it probably is a bit of overstepping and there's a little bit more administration and paperwork, but it's there because the horsemen or the different facilities couldn't get together and come up with like a common national, you know, law, so to speak,
Hmm.
or regulations themselves, because every track and every state had their own regulations. There was inconsistencies all over the place. So if nothing else, it's at least kind of creating a level of consistency across the different jurisdictions.
Can you give us the Coles Note version and say the name of that and get again the integrity? What was it? The
It's the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act, so it's HISA,
Okay.
and it regulates things like medications and what's allowed, what's not allowed. So, and as an example, like Lasix has become a big area of controversy. Is it a performance enhancer? Is it a safety issue for horses? And you talk to your trainers, and they'll say it's a safety issue because you're going to see less bleeding from the horses when they're racing, basically. You hear others saying no, it's cheating because it's a performance enhancer, and so
Right.
it's going to mask over other issues. And so in some ways you get people that are regulators that really don't know horses at all,
Hmm.
that are making laws to people that do know horses, and the people that do know horses are starting to be like, this is ridiculous. And in some
Yeah.
cases it is, but again, it's there because these jurisdictions were just not able to connect and come up with their own set of bylaws or regulations. And this is the result of that, because you were having problems on the racetrack,
Hmm.
and there were issues with somebody illegally medicating a horse and getting away with it in this one jurisdiction, but maybe they weren't in this other. But how do you make sure that it's more consistent across all of those? So
Right.
I think that's where Congress finally stepped in and we're like, we're going to do something about this now. So in spite of, some of the, and it still has quite a bit of controversy within the racing business, and it's a pain in the butt for a lot of the people at the track, because they've got to do a lot more paperwork and they've got to do a
Yeah.
lot more administration, and they've got to, they get tagged for silly things that really aren't that necessary. But again, it's at least something that's
Yeah. Nobody wants more regulation because it comes with more money and more paperwork, but humans seem to need to be saved from themselves and their greed and desire to win and be in power. And
yeah.
yeah, I try to look at not just in horse racing, but in all aspects of the horse industry.
Mhm.
um, the horses often come to harm when there's no harm intended, just out of ignorance of how horses think and
Yeah.
operate and what they need. And I think, if you want to drive a snowmobile, you have to take a course and study and get a license. If
Hmm.
you want to have so many things, there is something that you have to do to be able to own it or do it or partake.
Hmm.
And I don't think it should be a stretch that somebody that owns a horse needs to pass some sort of educational level about how they think, what their
Hmm.
species needs. And then there's some things I think once you understand about horses and not just blindly believing some of the stuff we've been handed down,
Hmm.
you can't look back. So
Right.
I don't know
Right.
if in your experience, has there been any other regulation changes that you've seen make a difference or got behind?
I think this was probably the big one, is this Horse Racing and Safety Integrity
Yeah,
Act. I mean, this has really started to put a lot more.
it's making
It's,
change.
I think what it's done. I don't really like I don't really like the regulations they put in place to a large extent. But what I do like is the fact that they're bringing attention to the need for regulation.
Yeah.
And they're basically telling these racetracks and these, actually not even the racetracks, it's the states themselves. Each state has their own set of rules, and they're going back to the states and saying, you guys need to get on the same page here. You can't just have different rules because you're in a different state. And if you're in an area where you can ship a horse within 2 or 3 hours to, 5 or 6 or 7 different states, I mean, you're dealing with 7 or 6, all those different types of potential regulations. So I like the fact that there's a spotlight being put on the need for regulation, even if I don't necessarily agree with all of the regulations that they're putting in
Yeah.
place. But like, we're humans, and we'll adapt.
Mhm.
And my expectation is, things will start to, once we get used to this, then we'll start to make it better, and we'll start to iterate it. And, the pendulum should be able to swing back to something that's actually a bit more reasonable. Hopefully that will
Mhm.
be the case. A lot more safety too. I'm seeing a couple of years ago, there was a lot of fatalities in California, and there was a lot of attention that was brought to the horses that were, in fact, breaking down on the racetrack. And so that also has led to, I think, a lot more scrutiny and a lot more conservative approaches to racing. Like, they'll cancel races now, where in the past they might not have done so if they feel like it's a safety concern. If the weather is really not good, or if it's too hot, if it's too
Oh my
cold. I mean, I'm
goodness.
seeing more
Yeah.
more of that. So they'll be a little bit more cognizant of some of those safety issues. But in the tracks themselves, they're bringing in more experts, and they're testing the surface a lot more.
Mhm.
They're much more conservative in taking the races off of the grass, if even if it rained the day before. And you think that they're fine, everything looks good today and the grass looks good, they'll still potentially pull them off the grass because they want to be absolutely sure that it's a safe course. So, and the stats are backing that up, that there is definitely been a lot more improvement there too. So that's good to see as well.
Yeah. Well, I just think in my history watching races and participating in 3-day eventing, old school was you did it come hell or high water. They
Yeah,
might cancel something if there was an imminent chance of a lightning strike, and that was all that would cancel it. And
yeah.
we would churn through mud and be jumping things on tired horses downhill in the mud and the rain, and it was nuts. So this, yeah, safety, it isn't a cavalry test,
No.
we need to live to see another day. We don't need to run just because it's scheduled to. And yeah,
Hmm.
a shift in our mentality is good.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So
Um,
overall, I do think I think there's a lot of things that are moving in the right direction. Can we do more? Of course, there's always more we could do. But you have to balance, what actually is realistic versus what's feasible. And so I do think, again, just the awareness, social media has been helpful.
mhm,
Sometimes things get a little carried away and over the top, but again, just having more awareness and seeing much more participation in the charities, in the aftercare, to me is encouraging to see that. And actually, we're seeing a really big decline in the number of horses that do go through that pipeline. Even from when I started writing this book, it was 100,000 plus horses that were being transported across the U.S. borders to Canada, Mexico. I think 80% of it was Mexico. But in the last year, that's down about 80%. So we're definitely seeing a reduction in that as well. So hopefully the SAFE Act will be the kind of the final, stop to that practice.
yeah. One of our Canadian artists and heroines, Jan Arden, is really behind a big move to stop the exportation of horses for slaughter, and that it's going on in Canada. So
Yeah.
a lot of movement in that direction. And there sounds like there are more and more programs like in Canada, we would have the Long Run Foundation and other foundations like it that get these thoroughbreds in at the end of their racing career and adopt them out to people.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at some of our viewers or listeners who will be interested in, like, well, I could rehome a thoroughbred. I wonder if there's some things you might want to share about that journey, because
Mhm.
if I understand correctly, you hadn't been riding before you retired a racehorse, and was it the thoroughbred that was this your first riding and stuff as a?
I had ridden a little bit in college, as I mentioned,
Oh, right,
and
right.
but then I didn't ride for a long time.
Yeah.
And then I did. My daughter actually started taking riding lessons at a farm that's not too far, and so I started going out to the farm, and I thought to myself, well, if she's riding, then I could ride again.
Yeah.
And so I started taking riding lessons at that time, when she was still pretty young. And I did that for a couple of years, and then this horse was getting near the end of his career, and I thought to myself, I can do
This
this.
sounds, yeah.
Let me bring him out to the farm and let me see if I can get on his back. Maybe feeling a little confident and a little cocky, and so we did. We brought him out. He had been turned out for about a year
His
after
name.
he was racing, and we brought him into the farm, and he's been with me there ever since. But it's been a terrific experience for me, but it's one that requires a lot of patience.
Hmm. So
A
tell
lot of
me his
patience.
name, this wonderful horse.
His name is Rooster City.
Rooster City. Does he have a nickname?
Rooster.
Rooster. So Rooster had how many starts?
Rooster ran about 30 races.
Yeah.
He ran from age 2 through age 8. So he had a good career.
Wow.
He raced up and down the West Coast, California, Washington, and British Columbia is where he raced.
What a career.
Yeah, and he was good. He won a handful of races. He was stakes placed. I think 7 times he was stakes placed. But he never won a stake. He missed a few by just a head or a half length, but he was a good trying horse, and he's Mr. Personality. He was Mr. Personality at the racetrack. If you went to the barn when he was racing, he'd be the first horse that would pop his head out of his stall and look for carrots. He's definitely a carrot eating champion. I would put him up against any horse anywhere in a carrot eating contest, and I guarantee you he'd be really
Hands
good.
down. Rooster. He's got it.
He does. He does. He still has a big personality. We don't try to change him in that way. But he's really fun to be around. But he's also a good teacher. He was someone that didn't have a ton of riding experience, and then getting a hot-blooded thoroughbred, it could be first time, was a little nervous for me.
Mhm.
But as you probably know, just you need to learn how to relax and not show that to him as much as you can.
Mhm.
But also make sure you're trying to take control. And there were definitely times where he was going to try to take control, and we didn't battle, but we would have a discussion about that, and eventually we would figure out the right answer, and then we would move on from there. And then he does. I call it a Rolodex. He's got a Rolodex of things he likes to do now with I call it these little tests that he does once in a while. It's
Mhm.
like, okay, we're gonna go through this one now. It's like, he'll turn his head a certain way, and want to drift off, or he'll want to stop and scratch his leg or something like that. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, we're not going to do that today. We're just
Ways
going
of
to keep
showing his opinion.
his opinion. Yes,
Yep, fair
yes.
enough.
And when he's on his own, he loves to find a big puddle,
Yes.
and then he likes to roll in it.
Oh boy.
And he especially likes to do that as soon as the blanket comes off. So
Yeah. Big grooming job ahead of you after that.
yes, he can be
Lots of
quite the dirty
training.
horse.
He sounds like quite a character. I want to maybe bring some listeners who are interested in thoroughbreds and haven't worked
Mhm.
with them before a little bit more through the mentality of these relatively young horses that come
Mhm.
off the track at
Yep.
8. That's an amazing career that he had. So I mean, they live and breathe opening up their bodies and reveling in their athleticism.
Mhm.
And then we take them off the track and we want to control, 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 control. So I wonder if between the two of us, we can help people get from this racing machine
Mhm.
through the layup period that they need to kind of come down a bit, and how to get this animal bred to run
Yeah.
to be something that someone that's an average adult amateur horse lover with a bit of education can handle.
Mhm. Yeah, I can give you my experience, and I'm sure it could be relevant for others
Mhm.
that wanna do the same thing. So first off is making sure you're not trying to do it on your own. That would be number one, especially if you're not, an experienced horse person yourself. You definitely want to bring in someone that is going to help with the training. And provide the guidance, and they don't need to be there all the time, but having that guidance is super important. And lesson number one would be, do not try to do everything in one day, or 1 week, or 1 month, or even 1 year, because it's going to take a while. And so you've got to be number one, you've got to be really patient, and you've got to give them that time to decompress. And for my horse, he needs time in pasture as well. You can't just keep him in a stall. So he gets out every day. And if he's got an issue where he's not allowed out, because it's for his own good, he will get pent up. And the first thing we want to do with him is just make sure he can stretch his legs, and sometimes he just needs to yeehaw a little bit, and let
Yeah,
that
blow off
get it,
steam.
yeah, blow off steam, get it out, and then you could start working with them. So that would be number one, is just give him time to acclimate to his new environment. Number two is, um, I would do a lot of groundwork with them. Start by just trying to lead him around. Try to be really consistent about it. You can definitely correct, but you want to be careful with your corrections, especially when they're first, coming off the track, because they will overreact if you get a little too aggressive, I think, at least my experience with that. So, you want to be firm, but you don't want to be over the top about that. Um, Round pen is a great option, because you're in a controlled environment, and generally speaking, you should be, relatively safe. He's not gonna charge at you, most likely. And You can actually, start off trying to, just get them moving, and then they'll run in the round pen, and that's okay. Let them blow off that steam, and then they'll get tired. And once they start tiring out, then you could start, doing different things. You can, speed up, slow down, change directions, that sort of thing. And so I would say groundwork, quite a while until you feel confident and comfortable with that horse, and then you could practice saddling, and then eventually, you can leg up on the horse, and then again try to take it slow at first, and just you have to be able to read the horse's emotion though too. And I've learned there are days I'm just not going to get on him, because I could feel the energy.
Mhm.
And it's just something, it's hard to actually teach that, I think, but you have to just sense it, in sense of, he might look and seem like he's totally normal, but you have him on a lead line, and you just know he's just ready to blow at the first opportunity. Someone drops a can, or starts an engine, or slams the door, and next thing you know, he's going to be taking off, for who knows where. And so having that sense of what he's up, and where he's at, and it could be just like he might be walking a step or two faster than he normally does, or he might not feel relaxed, or the head might be up, or he might be harrowing a bit. There's just all these subtle signals, and maybe they're not so subtle, but just understand his emotions before you try to do something that he may not be wanting to do in that moment, because you don't want to get into a real argument with him if you can avoid that.
Mhm.
And so if everything, if conditions are good, and you have to feel good too. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got to the farm where I've wanted to ride, and it looks like he's fine, and I'm just tired, and it's like, I'm not going to push myself because then I'll make a mistake and I'll create a bad precedent. And so consistency is another really important thing that
Mhm.
I've learned with him is try to keep it as routine and consistent as possible. Let him know that you're in charge, but also let him know that he knows that there's going to be a routine that we're going to follow. And so that will make it easier for him to follow what you're doing and follow your
Yeah.
lead.
Racehorses have grown up from the time of their yearling sales they were getting ready for having a job every
Absolutely.
day.
Yeah. Yes.
It's
Yes.
and their routine is solid. So when they get checked out in a field and then brought back in by a human for a new job, it helps them to understand what the expectations are and when they're
Yeah.
coming. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
what are we
I
doing
keep
today, boss?
Yeah, and I can't get out there every day, but when I do get out there, it's just I try to be as consistent as possible
Yeah.
with our routine and give them that job. They do like a job, and that is a huge change, like you mentioned. I mean, that's a really important one too, is from the moment they're born until the moment they're off the racetrack, they're literally being told what to do almost every day. And now all of a sudden they're kind of, oh, who's going to tell me what to do? And if no one's there to do that, they can get really confused and they can be really hard to work with at some point down the road because now all of a sudden, they've got this liberty and they think they're in charge.
Mhm.
So I think that's also a really important point is just recognizing the fact that they're used to someone handling them and being in charge and so forth. But they are going to come off, pretty tight, pretty fit, pretty amped up, and so you just have to give them time to decompress and get used to their new life.
Yeah. Yeah, people get kind of thrown by that. But if you think about it, they've been amped up so that when that penny drops, they run, right? Their whole
Hmm.
thing is like, run now, run, run. Like,
Yeah.
so that just comes into it. And people are like, why is he doing that? Well, he's a flight animal who's had his instincts as a flight animal just honed down
Yeah.
and exercised.
Yeah. And my guy's 18 right now, and they don't ever really lose that, I don't think.
Yeah.
So they still have that, if you tell me I'll go. But now at least he'll listen to the cues and he'll understand that, okay, I'm in charge and we're just not going to do that until he gets that signal. But they'll still if you let them, they'll take off and
Yeah.
they'll run still.
I try to have as often as possible, I embrace forward because I know that horses that are nervous find comfort in forward movement. And so I'll say, okay, forward and
Mm,
on this circle, forward and in that direction, forward and in a rhythm, forward and round. and
mm,
and find some ways to embrace it and to be able to ask for it, or else if we take these horses and all we do is go slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down, slow, like, oh, you start to set up
yeah.
a recipe for disaster for sure.
Yeah,
I've seen
yeah.
some of that, eh?
Regular lunging is really good for them, even if it's not that long. Yeah, I don't want to lunge them for 30 minutes, but if I can, and I get dizzy really quickly if I'm doing that circle thing. But if you can lunge them for 5 or 10 minutes, even, that's just usually enough to take the edge off a little bit and give them a chance to stretch and run those legs, and then after that, and it's also a way to make sure you have his attention.
Mhm.
I find lunging actually is a really good place to just, okay, let's get together. And if you're following my cues, and I've gotten to the point now where all my cues are even nonverbal. We can just, I could just speed up or slow down myself or raise an arm a little bit, and he'll respond to that. And that lets me know that he's honed in on me.
Mhm.
And now we can get to work because I know he's paying attention. So the
Yeah.
lunging is actually a really good way to get started each day as well.
Yeah, with that caveat, like you said, that it's like just get a little bit of the steam off, as opposed to like in the hunter jumper world, sometimes they'll lunge till they drop, LTD. They'll say like, no, 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 it's
Hmm.
not what Victor and I are saying.
No,
Don't
definitely
go
not.
there with your lunging, people.
I would be dropping for him though because I would be just getting
Yeah, but to let
too
them
much of that
play.
circular motion.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the groundwork and that time on the ground is really important. One thing that I've found interesting is you were touching on the topic of paying attention and responding instinctively to what the horse is telling you and to your environment. And
Mhm.
sometimes that can be really challenging for people, particularly if they don't come from horsey families,
Mhm.
or they're coming after work and bringing some of that stress into the barn. So
Mhm.
some of what I'm teaching people is that it's actually like a muscle you can build.
Mhm.
You can tune into your instincts more, and it
Mhm.
behooves you to, if you've got a thoroughbred, so that you can get that sort of go from mechanical and timing a little off to actually really being connected with them. So there
Yeah.
are all kinds of exercises that we do to bring people's nervous system into a state of flow, and then
Yeah.
to teach them to pay attention to that. Because I think some of what happens to people that have difficult experiences, maybe as adult amateurs trying with rehoming a thoroughbred, is they aren't present. And maybe they've gotten
Mhm.
away with that with some school horses and some
Mhm.
quarter horse crosses, and
Mhm.
they haven't been fully present and aware when they're handling them. But you just really better be, I think, Victor, with the thoroughbred.
Thoroughbred, you do need to be present. You definitely need to be
Zen, be your
present.
Zen master, be
Yeah.
present, or do something else with them that day, or
Yeah, I would agree. So I don't myself come from a horse background, and I've been fortunate because he's been a really good teacher. And I've tried to listen as much as possible, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it's like any other relationship. The more time you spend with the horse, the more he gets to know you and you get to know him, and you start to just understand each other. And it's not a spoken language, obviously, although he does speak to me when I have the carrots in my hand. I can
Mhm.
guarantee you that. But it is a language that you do share, and you could just pick up on the cues if you listen and pay attention, and he will do the same with you. If you come in like there was a time actually I was I had a race that was going on and I had my phone and it was streaming the race when I happened to be at the barn. And my horse was winning the race and I was getting really excited. And so I was cheering, and getting pretty animated. And then I went in and pulled him out of his stall and he was like kicking and bucking and jumping around. I'm like, uh-oh. It's like
He
he thinks
picked
we're
up
back
on
at the
your
racetrack.
energy. He wanted to party too. He was
He
ready.
did. He did. So I was just like, okay, lesson learned. If I'm gonna watch a race now, I'm not gonna do it near near his stall.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, even something like that, it's like it's amazing how quickly they pick up on your energy level and they want to please. And so, they're gonna, if you're nervous, they're gonna get nervous. And if you're excited, they're gonna get excited. And if you calm down, they're gonna calm down as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun that I came from a family line who would kind of poo-poo that, don't get too emotional about horses. No, they can think or they can feel what you feel, would be kind of poo-pooed. But then I
mm,
learned some of the science behind it, which I found really fascinating and validating, that I mean, that's their milieu. They do absolutely feel what we feel
hmm
and
hmm
react to it instantly. And yeah, there's no lying to a thoroughbred for sure.
Yeah. And one other thing I would say for thoroughbreds is first thing you want to do is you want to check their legs and check their feet before you do anything. Because you could put them in bubble wrap and they'll still find a way to find, ways to nick and cut and do strange things to themselves.
Yeah,
So
amazingly fragile, right?
they
So,
are, and they've got thin soles, so you just really want to check their legs and feet before you get
yeah.
started.
Yeah, they are for the real barefoot fanatics, they might not want to have a thoroughbred, because while some thoroughbreds can go barefoot, you know, they weren't bred to have tough feet. They were bred
Right,
to run fast.
right, right.
Yeah, they're not the toughest souls. So yeah, you may end up with some of them coming off the track require quite a lot of hoof care, which can be expensive. So budget for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
How do you like to feed them so they keep weight on, but they don't go woo with too much energy. Do you have any tips for feeding the thoroughbred?
Consult with the vet for, for one is, and you definitely want to, and if you're going to change their diet, consult with your vet. Don't just abruptly change their diet. If you feel like they're getting a little ribby and that they need to put some weight on, bring it to your vet and see what they say. My horse gets uh 8 cups twice a day of equine senior. I think it's 8 cups. Yeah, he gets 8 cups twice a day of equine senior, and then he gets grazing in the field, but he also gets 2 flakes of alfalfa, and one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and then he also gets 2 or 3 flakes of timothy as well. So, he gets plenty of grass, and we supplement it with the grain for the weight itself, specifically.
Yeah. And I brought that up because if someone was a proud owner of generations of quarter horses and Morgans and crossbreds, and then they brought their first thoroughbred home, they might accidentally starve the poor thing to death or not realize
Yeah.
how many calories it takes to keep a thoroughbred fed. And the feed you mentioned as a senior feed will be high in both fat and fiber, so keeping those up. The alfalfa really good for their guts, which they are so many of them have ulcers. Any of our performance horses and ridden horses, it's really common, and alfalfa helps with that.
Yeah.
And there are services in like Mad Barn will analyze your hay, and without they don't necessarily prejudice towards their products, suggest how much of whatever feed you want to feed to balance it. And
Right.
it stuff you might get away with your average crossbred, you're going to have to pay attention to, feeding
Yeah.
your young
I agree.
Ferrari, your thoroughbred. It's not a little Fiat.
No, definitely. Yeah, no, and it is important to make sure you're getting your vet involved, because your vet's going to get to know that horse. You will be getting your visits from them on a pretty. We get a couple visits a year for various issues, so the vet will get to know the horse. Sometimes I joke around with my vet and say, "Where's my frequent flyer card?" I think I could use one of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to be prepared for that, and it's not something you necessarily can prevent or avoid. They are horses, and they are high energy, and they can do things that you don't expect sometimes, and so just having a vet on call is important.
And in your time with horses, is there something in particular that they have brought to you, mounted or unmounted, in your time with them that stands out as a highlight that they brought to your life?
I would say just having that relationship has been really important to me. I didn't know it was going to happen, but it did, and it becomes pretty special in terms of just having that relationship. I walk out to the pasture to collect him, and he can come charging right up to the gate from way across the pasture, and that's just something you just don't necessarily know that that's going to happen when you first get started. But his excitement and seeing me, and then dropping his head and rubbing it up against against my arm, and so forth. I mean, that to me has been pretty special. But also just the counterbalance that it brings from the day-to-day stress of tech work, and being in the corporate world. It's just such a counterbalance to everything that we do on a day-to-day basis, and so that also has been incredibly valuable. And again, I didn't anticipate any of this. This is just stuff that I discovered as a result of getting involved with the horse.
Beautiful. I've found in my evolution that in many ways I could care less if I ever rode them again. I started to work alongside horses as healers in other people's therapeutic programs to help people recover from trauma. And I helped here on my own farm with children with communication issues and spectrum disorders, and what they can bring to a human being's life is so much more important than what I used to try to do with my horses. I think this is just an opinion, but I was pursuing sport, and
Mm.
my whole community was amazing getting behind me to try to get this local kid to the Olympics. But man, we put some energy into programs where horses heal people. Oh
Mm-hmm.
my goodness. Then we've got an outlet for more thoroughbreds because they don't all retire
Right.
sound, and not
Right.
all of us are sound enough to climb on them. But could you find a thoroughbred and give it a second life to live without sitting on it again?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, and it's a really good point too, because the thing is with a thoroughbred, you're talking about 1,000, 1,200 pounds, or any horse for that matter. But a thoroughbred in particular, one that has, that hot blood, um, you have to be able to work with that horse because they're bigger, they're stronger, and if they decide that they want to, you know, not cooperate, that's something that they can do. So the only way you're going to you can't overpower them. You have to be able to get them to work with you. And so that to me is a really important way in which we as people have to compromise a little bit or understand where the other party is coming from so that we can actually create that connection and be able to communicate effectively with the horse. And that's something again I learned, working with my thoroughbred is, if I just try to bully him, that's not going to work out too well for me.
Yeah. Good
So,
luck.
so yeah, exactly. So understanding that it's a team that you have to work together, and that translates to a lot of different things in life. But just knowing that you're just not going to be able to go in there and just insert your will on this horse. You're going to have to work with them because they're a big animal and
Mhm.
they're a strong animal, and if you don't, then you're just not going to get too far with them.
Yeah. You don't want to get a no out of them, right? You don't want to put yourself in a situation where, contract that is pressure and release based, you're saying, I'm going to ramp up this pressure. And they say no, because like, oh boy, right? It starts to get ugly. So I've found I'm still learning. I'm a generations of horse people in my blood. And I am learning now how to clicker train and target train and do positive reinforcement to create situations where we can take the pressure off and get what we
Hmm.
want done without starting to enter that contract. And I think because I see a really wide variety of the horse world, I'm not just like in one specific discipline like dressage or hunter jumpers or whatever. I see a
Mm.
lot of methods that work with the average compliant backyard horse that's
Hmm.
got a different mentality, and people will use tactics on it that maybe they don't realize are flooding a horse's nervous system or putting them into a position where they just give up. And it's been okayed for so long,
Mm.
but you start to try it with the thoroughbred, or you learn all these different methods,
Mm.
and it opens your eyes. So I would say to the average beautiful horse loving adult amateur who wants to do this, learn about how they learn,
Hmm.
and how our nervous systems work and stuff, just so that you can, especially if you've been um yeah, working with a more compliant breed, kind of like
Yeah.
going from
Yeah.
your average backyard mutt to handling a greyhound.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
listen to them, really listen, pay attention to, and they will tell you. That's the thing about the thoroughbreds, at least my experience will tell me that, and they're not all carbon copies of each other. You might
Mm.
get one that's pretty mellow, although, not necessarily, but and you might find one that's really high strung, and you just like people, they're all going to have different personalities, but the thing is, if you pay attention and you listen to that horse, they will tell you. You just
Mhm.
have to make sure you're picking up the right cues and that you're honing in on what they are trying to communicate with you. And if
Mhm.
you acknowledge that with them, they will learn to trust you as well. And that's where I feel like I've gotten with my horse. But again, he's continually teaching me new things. I'll tell you one thing that's kind of fun with our horse. So shoeing a thoroughbred can be a challenge sometimes. And sometimes they might want to kick, or they might not appreciate the farrier, and they might not know the farrier. And so my horse was never nasty or mean in that sense, but he was very uh, he just liked to not stand still, let's say. And so I'd get him in position, and we'd start working on his feet, and all of a sudden he'd say, I'm just gonna walk through you and walk past you." And so the farrier's like, "Hey, this is getting a little ridiculous. We might have to just tranquilize him and calm him down so that he doesn't do this anymore." And I'm thinking, I don't want to, or put a lip chain on him or something. I'm like, A, I'm not going to put a lip chain on him. And B, I don't want to tranquilize him, just for getting shoes. He should be okay with this. So I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring a bag of baby carrots with me. And when you start chewing him, I'm going to feed him the carrots. And I'll dole them out like, I'll ration them out so that, he doesn't eat them all in, 10 seconds. And so now for, the last 2 or 3 years, whenever the farrier comes, I load up on the carrots, and
Yeah.
it worked actually quite well for
Yeah.
for us. And it's just, again, listening to him, and making it a positive experience actually for him. So now the farrier showed up last Friday, and I pulled him out of his stall, and he immediately like went right up to where the farrier was making, setting up. And at one point, he was putting the shoe in the oven, and I was just like, "Okay, let's take a walk." And my horse was like, "No, I'm not going anywhere. We're
Yeah.
just gonna stay right here."
This is where good things happen, right here. Yeah.
So in terms of taking a bad experience and making it a good experience, that's a good example of doing that. And situational awareness, and being a little creative, and listening to your horse a little bit there. So he's very happy to get shoed now. So
Nice. Well, that's a beautiful example of a shift from going to war. Like, my horse won't stand for the farrier, so we better show him who's.
yeah,
Or we could feed him carrots and make it positive. Oh,
yeah, yeah,
there is a shift out there. It's happening, and that's an example of it for sure.
definitely, definitely.
Is there anything else that you would like to see changed or want to share in particular to
I think let's continue down this path of awareness, and let's make sure that we're doing everything we can. I would just say thoroughbreds themselves can have a bit of a reputation, and I would also say that they are really good to work with. Once they get to know you, you get to know them. It's a great relationship, and don't let them intimidate you, but let them, let them show you what they can do. And I think they're great to work with. They're great horses that love to have a job, and they're just really wonderful animals to be around.
lovely. I'm looking to put some of these new skills I've learned in liberty work and positive reinforcement into helping a thoroughbred off the track with a
Mm,
project that is a bit of a larger project to document it and the evolution of horsecraft that my dad,
mm,
as he's an octogenarian now, an old veterinarian, what he has seen in his generations, and myself, and to do a bit of a journey with the magic of horsecraft and
mm.
a thoroughbred that needs a year or more to have
Yeah,
a start with another life,
yeah.
and what can we do using these more attuned methods and saying things like listening to our horses that wasn't necessarily the norm
Mm.
a generation ago. So
Hey, one more thing too I'll bring up is, back in I guess the 70s or 80s, and I'm sure your dad would be able to speak to this, is, the way in which got a horse, the way in which you first, saddled a horse, and a racehorse in particular, was you'd break their spirit, and we call that breaking the horse.
Hmm.
The practices today are very different. There's much more cooperation. It's more of the gentling process that is being practiced, from what I could tell. And so the horses transition from when they're starting to train is also a lot more positive than what they had experienced, in the past. And so now when they're being retired, they're not necessarily damaged in the head that they might have been, 30, 40 years ago. So, they're amped up, and they're going to run, but they haven't been through that really bad experience of having their spirit broken, really, in terms of that level of initial training. So that's a big change. I think that's occurred in the industry probably over the last 30 or 40 years. And I think Monty Roberts, I think, was the person that first introduced that. But I think, it's pretty widespread now in terms of how we're training those yearlings and 2-year-olds.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I thank you for sharing so much of what's positive about the racehorse industry. I'm going to ask a few things here, and one is of our listeners in response to this. If you can share things that you would like to see or things that you like about the horse industry, and don't go, yeah, but it's really terrible because horses get kissing spine and they give it, but like we know. But we're either going to love it or we're going to change it.
Mm.
So let's keep any of the feedback about what we can do or we want to see. One thing I'll encourage people. The other thing I wanted to ask again is just a plug for the book. And because I get hung up on saying the name of it, I get a little bit hung up on. Can you say the name again of your book?
Yeah, the name of the book is Heliacal Star.
Right. There will be a link in the notes so you can find it. And
Yeah.
it is available on Amazon. And if you have a husband, a wife, a lover, a friend who likes horses, this is a really, really good gift. And then it'll
Ah, there it is. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
it'll support our vision of awareness of what's happening in the horse industry and change. So I thank you very much for taking the time to finish a book. Someone who started one or two,
It it
thank
it
you
it
for
was
finishing.
an act of perseverance. It took 7 years for me to go from start to finish on it. So and there were many times I was ready to quit, and it was definitely a test of perseverance to get to the finish line on this one. I'm
Well,
glad I did. I think it turned out really well. And it ended up, it's a good story for folks to read, and hopefully bring some good awareness to some of the life on the backstretch, and what happens, or could happen in the world of
yeah,
racing.
there are some characters on the backstretch. So I'm going to, usually what we do at this point is say thank you and goodbye to our podcast listeners who will get this later. And hello to our guests who came today to see if they have any questions for you. So I wonder, Rochelle, do you have any questions today?
No, just a comment. I Googled the book and the reviews are awesome. So I'll be ordering the book.
Awesome.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing. It was quite interesting. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you. I
Rochelle.
appreciate that.
Appreciate you showing up tonight. And Claudia, I think, is probably our silent partner in tonight's discussion, unless she has anything to say briefly. But I think we'll wrap it up. I appreciate this. This is the first interview that I've done where I haven't known the guest ahead of time or had conversations ahead of time.
Oh, wow.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was a good discussion. I love talking about the horses and talking about Rooster, and just, yeah, it's such a refreshing change sometimes from the day-to-day grind of corporate life, let's just say. And
Yeah. Well, I could see you light up. That was my favorite part about tonight, if I had to pick it out, was when we started talking a bit more about Rooster's personality and your experience with. You absolutely light up when you talk about him. So
Yeah.
enjoy Rooster. Thank you for noticing what you didn't like. And since you didn't love it, thanks for trying to change it. And you are changing it. We're making change, Victor.
Yeah, one person at a time. But yeah, we we'll get the majority, and I think I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing, and if we stay positive, then and take care of these guys, then hopefully good things will come our way, and come their way especially.
Super.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, and thanks for your time, and nice to meet everybody.
You too. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, you're still here. Thanks so much for listening. What you think and feel matters. If this resonated with you, please like and share. It truly makes a difference. I encourage you to engage with the content on my Substack account and my socials, all at The Magic of Horsecraft, where you can join the discussion and shape the future shows. Tell me what you want to hear more of or less of, and we'll evolve together as we grow a community of like-minded souls here for the good of the horse. If you're an adult amateur horse lover looking for confidence and clarity in your role of equine steward, check out my course, From Amateur to Magician, Making Magic with Horses, at themagicofhorsecraft.com. Until then, I'm here to remind you of a couple things. 1, underneath it all, we all want the same things: to be heard, understood, and accepted for who we are. And 2, anything is possible. Take a chance.